I think the most surprising thing we learned today too was was how much thought really went into designing the governance system for Polkadot and how it's reinventing how blockchains can evolve over time. Hi there, and welcome to the Parachain Auctions podcast hosted by Kraken. I'm Brian Hoffman, crypto platform product lead, and I'm glad you could join me out here on the cutting edge of crypto technologies. On this show, you'll hear from leaders and innovators around the world building parachains on Polkadot and Kusama. Tune in for insights from the best and brightest about their new projects. Whether this is the first you've heard of parachains or you're a DeFi aficionado, come with us behind the scenes as we explore the technology of the future today. Today we have with us Dieter Fishbein, the head of ecosystem development at Web3 Foundation. He's back again with us, and we're going to talk parachains once again. So welcome to the show, Dieter.
Thanks, Brian. Awesome to be here, and thanks for having me back.
Yeah, so if people didn't get a chance to see the last podcast that you were on, we had a really amazing, great conversation around Kusama Parachain auctions and your background and learning a lot about how you came to work at Web3 and all of the exciting work that you all are doing. What's been up since we last talked? Are you pleased with how things have been going?
Yeah, I mean, super pleased. So, I mean, the big thing that's happened throughout the summer and into the fall has obviously been Kusama Parachain auctions. Brian, you've done an awesome job covering these, and really, like, we're super excited about the degree to which the community has participated. Not only have we seen like almost 30% of Kusama tokens locked up in Parachain auctions, but like much more importantly than that, we've seen like over 100,000 participants if you look at kind of the individual addresses, which is like shows like the real strength of not just capital, which is, I mean, good, but really not what we're optimizing for, but really that like people believe in this and want it to succeed.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. I was looking at the stats for Kusama versus Polkadot because we're kind of heading that direction, and it's just incredible the amount of participation, and we've seen a lot of excitement and energy around it on our platform for sure as we rolled that out. Just to kind of quickly recap for our audience. I mean, I know we got into it pretty in depth last time, but maybe you could just give us a quick overview of kind of what parachains are, because we may have some listeners that are just jumping on for the first time.
100%. So before kind of diving into that a little bit, like let me explain roughly what Polkadot is and the thesis behind Polkadot. Polkadot's a layer 0 meta protocol. Okay, like that's a bit of jargon, but really, like the reason it exists is because we believe in a multi-chain future, and if you believe that, you need some sort of layer that allows kind of different independent blockchains to communicate with one another securely and using kind of really intimate interoperability. And Polkadot is that kind of unsexy infrastructure to support this multi-chain future. And so jumping to what parachains are these independent blockchains that Polkadot, handles the connectivity and security for. And so when we talk about what parachain auctions are, essentially for one of these parachains to connect to Polkadot, it uses a lot of resources from the network. Essentially, it uses like Polkadot validator resources. And really, there's a finite number of these parachains that can be connected to Polkadot at any given time. And so auctions are Polkadot's way of determining like who gets these resources based essentially around the community backing for each of these projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting and novel approach to scaling, because I think a lot of people just assume that there's some perfect solution for infinite scalability. But I like how you guys are kind of pragmatic about it and saying, well, maybe we look at how we're managing those finite resources rather than try to chase this pipe dream perhaps that we don't know is out there, but it seems to be working, whatever it is. And I'd love to talk a little bit later in this discussion about maybe the governance process around how those are created and
For sure.
People can participate. But before jumping in too deep, I mean, I think what do you think has you've learned from what's happened on the Kusama parachains? We had 11 auctions so far, so I think we've probably got a good sample size of seeing these in action. What are some of the things that surprised you about that whole ordeal?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, quite honestly, I didn't expect kind of the amount of or KSM to be locked up that was. I think like the golden question for the past couple of years from teams are what has been, how many how many KSM does it take to secure a parachain slot? And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we now have data points for this. I mean, I think like the median contribution, I haven't actually looked at this like formally, but was probably around 200,000 KSM for a winning slot, or 2% of total supply, like bonded essentially.
Mm-hmm.
This number and kind of the highest number at 500,000 were very high, in my view. I don't think this actually is like a good or bad thing, more than that it really just indicates how much the community wants to get involved in determining, how these resources are allocated, which I guess is a good thing. But this was kind of the key takeaway from our end here.
So from our perspective, it seems like one of the big breakout stars of the first 11 auctions was Moon River, which is really trying to create a compatibility layer for apps that run on the EVM. And are you surprised at how well that kind of pitch resonated with Polkadot or Kusama users? I mean, I think a lot of blockchains try to like build their own persona, but a lot of this is like the excitement from Ethereum carrying over into your
Yeah,
ecosystem.
this is
How has that
this is
been?
it's a really interesting question, because a few years ago, I think almost 3 years ago, was when really kind of this thought of like Polkadot, and I mean, Kusama wasn't really in the narrative then, but like Polkadot, the debate as to whether Polkadot should or should not have some sort of EVM compatibility came up. And the thought has always been that, on one hand, people should be using Polkadot strengths, right? People should be developing on Substrate because Substrate has been built to be a better layer for development. And EVM, in some sense, is like a legacy system. I mean, not completely true, but this thing was built in 2014, really, the first kind of version of Solidity by Gav. And so, I mean, a lot of people kind of poo-poo doing that, because it's like kind of admitting that we still want to support this when we should actually be like having an upgrade. Like this is like an age-old battle, right?
Yeah.
I mean, beta versus VHS. And so this was a bit of a battle, but nobody can really poo-poo the fact that there's like 100 projects building on Moonbeam at this point. And really what they've done is they've made a really, really nice layer where you can like take, your application that's built on Solidity, but still, build out kind of substrate-based components to that by leveraging other parachains. And so the way we see it, the way Moonbeam sees it, is this is very much like a entrance into the Polkadot ecosystem for folks that haven't totally decided to be there or not yet. And so I think it's I think it resonates because of like really the ease of moving your application from Ethereum to Moonbeam is very high.
Surely, yeah, and it really demonstrates chains can be interoperable, and it's not just about one chain to rule them all. I think it really demonstrates it works, right? Like, I mean, now you can bring
Yeah.
applications and services proven on other chains over pretty easily and become compatible. So I think it's really exciting personally. Um, so one other really interesting thing that happened in those auctions that I don't know if anybody really expected to happen was the big Altair win, where we got a taste of exactly why those candle auctions maybe were implemented in the first place. Were you surprised to see that occur so quickly in this whole process?
I think at the time when you like looked at the odds of Altair winning that, and I don't quite remember, I think the odds were against them, but they still had kind of a decent chance. Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, I was a bit happy from like a pedagogical point of view because it teaches people like these are actually real. Yeah, I mean, I think it was generally a good thing that that happened at least once.
Yeah, I think even the team was ill prepared. I remember when we did the podcast with them after they won, they were like, "Oh, we
Yeah.
did not prepare much in terms of announcements." But I think it's really cool. It adds an interesting flair to like the whole event, and for us that are like watching and building on it so closely, it's kind of exciting. So, as of today, we're recording, and I don't know when you all will be listening, but as of today, for us recording, tomorrow afternoon, the Polkadot Parachain auctions kick off. So, proposal 118 is passed. Tomorrow's the official start date. I was just looking at the charts. Over $1 billion worth of Polkadot has already been bonded into crowd loans. That I believe that's fairly close to the total for Kusama already. That's incredible. What do you think the interest level has been since the whole Kusama parachain auction started?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at this from a user perspective, I mean, the figure that resonates with me, and we talked a bit about this earlier, right, is that I think there's something like 130,000 users or something like that. It's around 100,000, a little over that. And this doesn't include batched exchange contributions, so it's generally an underestimate actually. Contributed to Kusama crowd loans, and you see this number is like almost the same for Polkadot already, right? And we haven't even started the first auction. So, I mean, what this suggests to me, and like I think it'd be difficult to be wrong on this, is that like the number of users and the degree of community interest in Polkadot crowd loans is going to be multiples higher than Kusama, which in hindsight is obvious, and like, but it just the raw numbers are just so high to me that it still really, really amazes me.
Yeah, I think the point that you made around there being some like batched contributions, obviously Kraken does it that way, and so a lot of our users are kind of considered as one contribution, and then now we have others getting into the game. We have Binance, who's also got an offering, which I think will make a big difference. They're obviously really huge in the space. That must be really exciting to have other exchanges jumping in as well.
Yeah, I mean, for us, like we don't kind of work with exchanges to do that, but I think it shows really the demand from their users to actually participate in governance and kind of dictate the path of Polkadot and Kusama, which I think is really, really the powerful aspect here.
Yeah, I certainly I can see how it doesn't really necessarily directly affect you guys, but I think as kind of the big boys in the camp, I think it probably encourages you to see that at least all the players in the industry are kind of acknowledging that this is something for real that's worth investing in. It's worth putting in front of their clients, customers. I know we feel that way, and we feel very
Yeah,
strongly about the whole ecosystem.
I mean, ultimately, right? I think, and speculating, like I think what exchanges are really looking for, right, is engagement, right? They want their users to be engaged, and anything that can support that. I mean, crowd loans and participating in crowd loans is one aspect of that. Makes sense to have, and again, I think this just really reflects the desire of their users to want to engage with the Polkadot ecosystem, and for them to use that as kind of another pull.
What would you say are some of the things that you saw happen during the Kusama auctions that maybe sent you guys back to the drawing board a little bit, and or maybe gave you some inspiration for rethinking, how you design the process, how you like feel about it, like how you were there some things that you feel like you would have changed based on what you saw with the Kusama auctions?
It's a good question. Um, one aspect which we are changing for Polkadot, at least at the beginning, and then seeing how it goes, is that, I mean, with Kusama we had parachains kind of on board one by one, basically. So like, you did kind of one auction, and then at the end of that auction, the winning parachain would register as a parachain. I mean, for various reasons, this caused stress on the system. And so, we're kind of batching that, at least for the first two sets of auctions, where for those, I mean, we're going to do 5 auctions initially on Polkadot starting tomorrow. And then all these parachains will be onboarded on December 17th. And then we'll do the same for the following 6. I mean, so this is one, I would say, very minor change. I mean, to be quite honest, I'm pretty amazed at how smooth the process was. And really not a lot has been changed, which is, it's good. I mean, hopefully it means that it's a good process, and I think it just shows that the stability of what we've done here.
Yeah, after talking with a lot of the teams, especially after they reached transferability of their tokens and stuff, most of them have said, the process went really smoothly, and in fact, hopefully in Polkadot it goes even smoother, and they can cut down on the amount of work and time it takes to get their products live. One other thing that kind of threw me for a loop during the first few Parachain auctions was there was kind of like this like first batch, and then there was a second batch, but then at the end of the second batch, there was a decision like very quickly to throw in an 11th auction, or
totally
11th or 12th.
11th. It was 11th.
11th. That's right. Yeah. Yes, 11th. So help me out. Like, were you part of this process at all, if any?
No, look, I mean, very straight up what happened, right, is like, I think at the 9th auction, there was 3 potential parachains that were like all very, very close in terms of the total level of contributions. I forget what it was. I think it was, around kind of 200,000 or some level like that. And, this was being talked about in I believe in Kusama Direction, which is an element channel, which basically talks. I mean, it's basically the main governance channel for Kusama, where people talk about like how they want to see the network evolve, like different proposals that might be made in community governance, and the clear kind of desire from one of these potential parachains that was participating, and this was obviously echoed by the community, was that we should open up another auction, or like not we, but Kusama should open up another auction, because like, one, it doesn't look like these 10, or these, I think at that time 9 or something, initial slots had really stressed out resources, pretty clear that it could support another auction. And like, for all intents and purposes, apart from like, what amounts to minutia, the community wanted these 3 parachains. Right. There was just enough support where like any difference was negligibly small. And so what happened was, and I don't remember exactly which council member, but one of the Kusama council members put, in kind of light of this conversation happening kind of in one of the governance forums, put together a motion to open up an 11th slot. This was fast tracked by what's called the technical committee, which is one of these kind of sort of privileged collection of participants in governance. All they can do, when I say privilege, like it sounds much more intense than it is. All they can do is like fast track referendums, or like lower the enactment period. So like ultimately these things are still really and very much up to the community. But so this proposal was fast tracked by the technical committee and then voted on in a referendum. And the community, agreed and wanted this as well. So this is what happened. I mean, kind of an awesome result of Polkadot governance in action, because this was not planned. This was just, clearly a desire and clearly made sense. And then because of I keep using Polkadot in place of Kusama, but because of Kusama's flexible on-chain governance, I mean, this was super easy to do on the fly.
Yeah, I'm really glad you just made a great transition to the next section of questions that I wanted to kind of go over with you, which is diving into the governance process. Now, I wouldn't consider myself a governance expert for Polkadot in any form or fashion. It's a very complex and complicated process, but I was just hoping maybe for the benefit of the listeners, we could maybe just go into a little bit of it. You kind of started briefly describing some of the players in the process, but
100%.
Governance just in general, I think, is such an extremely hot topic right now. I mean, there's infinite governance tokens coming out, governance this, governance that. A lot of people don't even understand what governance is. I guess just to kind of lay the groundwork for the discussion, traditionally blockchains have kind of leaned on off-chain governance,
Yeah.
right? So, we have Bitcoin and they have their whole BIP process. It's all kind of negotiated over the mailing lists and discussion forums. But maybe you could compare how Polkadot's governance process kind of compares with those earlier models and maybe what the thinking
Yeah,
was behind changing it.
for sure. This is like, a subject that's really, really close to my heart and like really is like a core tenet of what we're trying to do. And so if you talk to, some hardcore Bitcoiners and then certain people in the Ethereum community where you do have the style of off-chain governance, essentially it amounts to like no governance because you basically have this like anarchistic way of having to get all these nodes or essentially all these nodes and miners agreeing to change the system because really it's like the miners that control which version of the client everyone is using.
Mhm.
This is really bad, right? Because it gives miners kind of outsized control. It's not transparent. There's no kind of community voice and governance, and it's kind of very unclear how these decisions are made. I mean, from the ground up, Polkadot's been designed to address this in the sense that Polkadot is like completely changeable through on-chain governance. And like when I say completely changeable, I mean basically every aspect of the protocol can be changed via a runtime upgrade. Different parameters of the protocol can be changed, like things like as basic as the number of validators or like parameters like basically the minimum stake to nominate. Like really anything. Like even the governance process can be changed by governance. Every aspect of what's called the runtime, which is kind of most of the logic behind how Polkadot works. And so this is kind of the principle on which governance was built, that like this stuff should be changeable by the community in a transparent, clear way, which does like two things. One, it means there is a process for governance, and it means like, the blockchain and the network can evolve as like changes and upgrades are needed. So I mean, Polkadot itself could be replaced with a completely different protocol through governance in a lot of ways. And two, that like this stuff should be transparent, and the community should have a say, right? And in fact, not just have a say, but completely control it. Does that make
Do you,
sense? Yeah.
yeah, no, I think it's definitely a very compelling vision for like how a blockchain can evolve. I mean, being someone who was in the space since really early on, I mean, we saw battles over simple things like block size, for many, many years, and it's
Yeah.
still ongoing, to be honest. And it feels like there's like always log jams around it. Now, some advocates for that would say that, it's great that a blockchain can't really change. And so perhaps there is some portion of the world where that makes sense, with different, vision in mind for what you're trying to accomplish. But I think being more dynamic, it kind of really reflects more of like where we are as humans, and technology and the way that we interact with it. Well, okay, so with this whole distinct governance process, I mean, does it ever concern you that perhaps the community won't choose a good path, or they might make a mistake or send you guys down on a road that is not desirable, or you just think it's the will of the people?
Yeah. I mean, this is always something people have in the back of their mind, but ultimately, if you don't have buy-in from the community on what you're doing, and if the community wants to go a completely different direction, then and it's really hard to talk about this without like real examples, I think. Um, then I don't know what you're doing. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? And so, for better or for worse, I think these things need to be community governed. Um, Otherwise, like you have essentially a centralized platform, right? And I don't think you can really achieve the goals you want to achieve without that.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits too that Polkadot has is like, and I mean, to be fair, Gavin does have like a huge persona in the space, but not like what we saw with like Satoshi, where he had made a lot of like really bold statements about what he thought this was for, or like, and people try to read between the lines, and he's not around anymore, or she's not around anymore. So there's this like weird constant battle to like decipher what the intention was, which I don't think you guys have that baggage, which is pretty cool. It kind of makes the governance process, like you said, a little bit more transparent and more community driven, in my opinion. But
Yeah,
I think we're seeing it in
ultimately,
action.
like one other point, which I think about often, is like Polkadot's not where it stops, right? And I think this is something we think about a lot. Like Polkadot is like right now, um, I think like one of the best attempts at making kind of a scalable layer zero protocol for like unifying blockchains and making, achieving the scalability and this interoperability that I think is super important. Like, I don't pretend to think that 10 years from now, like Polkadot will still be the answer to this, right? Like things change, tech changes. I mean, it's impossible for that not to happen. And I think to the extent that your platform cannot keep up with that means your platform will die. Yeah, I think it's, when you're talking about a platform to support application development, which is distinct from something like Bitcoin in a major way, in my view, then you gotta have upgradability built in. We see this with these two,
Yeah.
right? We see this horrible path that has been super, super difficult to move on, right? And I think how much easier would that be with good governance?
Yeah, there's probably like a fine line between flexibility and like just like too easy to like copy things and move. I mean, obviously we see like different areas of crypto technology where things are easy to copy, and then people use it in bad
Mm-hmm.
ways. Like we're seeing things like where token projects are cloned, and then there's rug pulls and all these like weird things. But I think
Yep.
there has to be some kind of ability to change over time. I mean, I think one of the most attractive things about working on Substrate and Polkadot and Kusama is that you have this flexibility around your parachain. Your community can kind of dictate how that operates outside of the other chains, but yet still be interoperable and still take advantage of that layer zero security and all of the benefits that come along with that. So it's really powerful. But back to the governance topic, that's the big piece that holds it all together, right? Because like it or not, even though you have your own parachain, you guys are all subject to the kind of governance process around Polkadot or Kusama in general. So let's talk a little bit about the players in that process. You hinted at the tech committee and the council, but like, what is the council? Like, who's
Yeah,
on this
yeah, yeah, yeah,
council?
yeah. So maybe let me just we'll start from the beginning. So like
It sounds like there's
ultimately,
like 12 people in a room sitting in like thrones or something, like dictating this, like Game of Thrones or something. But
yeah, not quite. But basically, like everything in governance, and there are these two what I would call like privileged collectives, which makes it sound much more grandiose than it is. But basically, just before we get into even what these are and what the composition is based upon, like everything in Polkadot, regardless of interventions from like the council or the technical committee, they go through referendum by token holders. And essentially the principle in which governance is based on, and I think there's some fair criticism of this principle, but I think it's the best we got, is one token, one vote. And this is when I say governed by the community and based on the community's decision making, this is the principle I come back to, right? It's not like one person, one vote. I mean, ultimately, blockchains are economic machines and they can't distinguish people. And so it is one token, one vote. And so when we think about what governance looks like, anyone can make a proposal, and this will eventually go to a referendum. And there will be a referendum on this proposal via token holders. That's
okay,
like,
so what?
yeah,
So what is a referendum exactly? Like, what is
yeah.
that? How does that manifest?
Basically, a referendum will be a period in which token holders can vote yes or no on a specific proposal. What a proposal is essentially is basically a change to the protocol in some way. Whether that is, we would like to change the runtime to this, we would like to increase the number of validators to this, and then there'll be the standard period for a referendum, and this is something that can be kind of edited by the technical committee or the council, is 28 days. And that will be kind of the voting period, basically. Does that make sense, Brian?
It does. Yeah. But so the proposals come in, like generally, like, is there kind of a rough guideline for like how the proposal gets created? Are they just coming in from people in the community, or is there like a place where people are discussing these?
Yes. So there's two ways a proposal can come in. It can come either from like anyone in the community. I forget what we call that, but there's a name for that. Or it can come from the council, basically. And like essentially what this looks like is two proposal queues. And so if I want to make a proposal as a community member, this will go in like the community proposal queue. If the council makes a proposal, and I think in this context it's called a motion, it goes in like this council proposal queue. And then, I think it's 30 days, basically like a proposal from one of these queues will be put forward and then voted on by the community for that referendum period. And it's going to alternate, like it's the queue, where the proposal comes from will alternate from queue to queue. So like you'll get one from the community that'll be put forward to a vote, that will end, implemented or not, and then you'll move to the council proposal queue. What this does effectively is it gives the council some priority in setting the agenda, but still the community, has a voice as well. What the council can do is they can do things like, they can make it so there's like a lower threshold of votes required for the proposal to pass. I mean, really just down to like a simple majority, basically from any sort of like quorum biasing. Because like basically a standard way that Polkadot will work in terms of like Polkadot governance will work is by making sure that like if there's a low turnout of voters, the amount of votes, like the size of the majority required to pass the vote will be high. Council can do things like say, actually, we just need a simple majority, or they can lower what's called the enactment period, which means like if the proposal were to pass, the one standard feature is that there's like a certain enactment period from when that proposal passes to when it's implemented. The council can waive this, basically. And also the technical committee can do things like lower the period required for the referendum to be run. So
okay, so that was kind of the fast track piece that you described before.
Exactly. Okay. So like basically the right way to think about it, and then maybe we can dive into like what these two like collectives actually look like, is like both the technical committee and the council can like fast track certain proposals and lower implementation time, but they cannot unilaterally make sure these things pass, right? Everything needs to go through referenda. There's a few small exceptions to this. So like one, the council, there is an on-chain treasury of like DOT and on Polkadot and KSM on Kusama. The council can make decisions on like how to spend this. The council can also do things like cancel slashes, basically. So if like a validator was slashed, I mean, the whole concept of slashes being it's to penalize malicious behavior. And, if there was a slash event and the council kind of agrees that, actually this validator just made a mistake and didn't behave maliciously, this can be canceled by council. And they can also, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, who's on the council, man? Tell us who's on the council. How do you become part of the council?
I mean, I've actually, so basically the way it works is like DOT holders, like as a DOT holder, like the same way you stake DOT, you can nominate up to a certain amount of council members. And it uses kind of the same algorithm it's called the fragment algorithm on how kind of that stake is distributed in order to kind of distribute your stake amongst like council members that you essentially whitelist. And so these are as elected representatives of token holders. I'm not sure exactly what the makeup looks like, but you can look at like right now because it does change basically every epoch. But you can kind of look at who's on there by looking at Polkadot.js pretty easily.
So it changes. It can change fairly frequently.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's on Polkadot every 4 hours and on Kusama every hour, something like that. I'm not completely sure of those numbers, but basically, like if I don't like a decision a counselor made, I can just stop basically nominating to them. And then if they don't have enough votes to be in the top, call it, again, I forget the exact number here, but like dozen counselors, then they will lose their seat on the council.
So as far as transparency goes, like how much of this is on chain? How much is off chain? Where can people
Oh,
go
this
to
is
like kind of
entirely this
see
is
this?
entirely on chain. So like basically, well, not entirely. Like all like referendums, all referendas, and like the output of that referenda, that's on chain, right? And like what change was made, and like the number of votes and things like that. There is basically an off-chain discussion board for like discussion on various referendas. So it's just like people have an easier time tracking discussion and what this looks like. This is called Pokeassembly. And you can basically, I think I sent it. I'll make sure you guys have a link after this recording, but you can go to, what is it exactly? Yeah, pokeassembly.io. You can go to like polkadot.pokeassembly.io and kusama.pokeassembly.io, and you can see like a record of all proposals, council motions, treasury proposals, referendas, and you can see like, when they were proposed. You can see like if they passed or not, the voting, and you can see it almost functions partially like a message board. So you can see like a lot of discussion around each one. I think the majority of the discussion there is all off chain, but this is kind of a nice little tool for coordinating coherent discussion about what's going on.
So what areas do you think probably need more research, more focus, to evolve and improve in the governance process? Basically, what are you
Yeah,
seeing so far?
I mean, what I like, right, is that governance is functioning, right, and I mean, I had stats on this, but there's been dozens of runtime upgrades for both Polkadot and Kusama since launch. I mean, the treasury on both chain has distributed millions and millions of dollars worth of tokens, kind of thing. And this is great, right? This means that things are getting done, that governance is functioning, and that it's working, right? Like, and it's affecting change. Like the protocol is upgrading itself. Resources are being deployed to better the network. Like this is what we all want. And I think it's working way better than any other on-chain governance system I've ever seen. So, we've done something right there. What I don't love is that there is a lot of burden to being a council member. And there is a lot of work that goes into that. And I think ultimately it is a bit of a bottleneck that we likely should, or that the network should likely move away from. Not quite clear how that looks, but I think to the extent that we can kind of make these privileged committees redundant, or at least the council redundant, I think that would be better and would allow things to function in a more nimble way than they are even now, even though they are working very well now.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So I guess the next question I have is, so we kind of understand these governance players. We have the technical committee, we have the council.
We didn't actually
What?
talk about the technical committee.
Okay, we
Is it,
hinted at it. We tiptoed
yeah.
around it. So let's dive into that. Who's on the
Yeah,
technical committee?
basically, I believe the way this works is the technical committee members are determined by council, and the idea is that like these should be Polkadot implementers. These should be, and there's at least 3 of these groups, right, that are building versions of the Polkadot host. I mean, Parity's building the Rust version, ChainSafe is building the Go version, and then Sormitsu's building the C++ version. So these should be folks that really know the technicals of the protocol inside and out. And really the goal of the technical committee is that like if there is an emergency technical change that needs to be made, either for security reason or simply because I mean, an example actually was the auction schedule for Parachains that we needed that. I mean, it was the desire that happened soon. The technical committee can like fast track these proposals, so they're voted on faster and implemented faster. So really not a lot of power there, but or not a lot of potentially malicious power there, but really making sure things can function nimbly.
Yeah, but in a way, super critical, right? Because
Yeah,
if there's like a concern or something that needs to change pretty quick, I mean, obviously the Parachain example is a rather benign
exactly. Yeah.
situation, but if there were some critical thing that needed to change quickly, you want to have that flexibility, I guess.
This is just it.
Um,
Like if there's ever a security issue
yeah,
where there's something significant at risk, then you want the technical committee to be there so you don't have to have like a 28-day referenda period. Right?
yeah,
Like you want
that
that
would be kind
decided
of a long
soon.
time to wait for like a big
Yeah, and
issue.
then followed by like a long enactment period as well, and then you can have a lot of things
Yeah.
go wrong in that time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, okay, so you have the technical committee, you have the council. That where does that leave everybody else? Like, what are the other people's responsibilities, or what can they do to participate if you're
Yeah,
not on a technical committee, you're not in the council?
you can vote in referenda, and basically, like we talked. I mentioned this before. It is essentially one token, one vote, but that's also not completely true. Like you can, like if you find a proposal you like and you really like it, you can basically agree for your tokens to be locked up longer, for like up to I think it's like 6 times as long, basically, or sorry, maybe it's 32 times as long to get like a boost in the power of your vote. I think up to 6 times. Yeah, I think that's how it works. And so the idea is like if you really feel strongly about a proposal, you can show kind of your support for it and have that counted more by being willing to remain economically aligned for the system in the system kind of longer than the standard period for voting, which is about 30 days.
What kind of participation rates are you seeing? Just from the general users. You said one coin, one vote. Like, are people participating? Are there things that you'd like to do to maybe boost that if it's not as high as you envision?
Yeah, I'm actually not completely sure what our participation rates are looking at right now. I wouldn't mind actually knowing that a bit better, but definitely they're not as high as they should be. And yeah, we want to boost that, right? We want to get more people involved in governance, and this is something we need to work on for sure. Um, yeah, I don't know exactly what they are, but they're lower than where we want them for sure.
Do you think that let's assume that they are lower than expected at this point, but do you see that as potentially being more of an educational challenge where people just
Hmm.
don't understand how to do it or why to do it, or do you think it's
No, I
an
mean,
awareness issue?
I think it's primarily a UI and educational challenge, and then depending like like I mean, using like Polkadot.js is fantastic, but it's really kind of designed for a power user. And I think we need better UI to allow, less technical members of the community to participate. I also think like it's unfair to expect that all users will want to use their voice in governance for the same thing, right? Like, some of these
Yeah.
runtime upgrades, for example, highly technical upgrades that where I mean I often don't even know like what they're actually trying to do, right?
Yeah.
So I mean I think we have to be realistic that it's not going to be 100% of the community that are going to be participating in 100% of votes. And we have to some extent, figure out what we want. What we definitely don't want are turnout rates to be low enough that this could be an attack vector, really. So, I think that's fundamentally what we want to optimize for. So we have to make it easy to participate, and we have to think about what's actually realistic, and from a safety threshold, what we actually need here. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Obviously there's probably some people we don't want voting. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, certainly, if it's something super technical, you want the right people helping make that determination. But I mean, obviously, the thing is, it's free and open, so anybody can vote either way. Even if you don't know what you're doing. Yeah, I think one of the challenges that we're thinking through, obviously at Kraken, and I'm sure other centralized exchanges that are doing a lot of this stuff are thinking through, is how do we provide ways for our clients to participate in governance? Because right now, I
Yeah.
mean, there's probably a large portion of tokens that are kind of sitting on centralized platforms that don't allow the holders to participate because there's just no UI component
This
or
is a
it's
huge
challenging.
this is a huge
Yeah.
problem because generally from what I've seen, exchanges are not super interested in providing this. Which is unfortunate. And I think like we talked about earlier, like, I mean, you guys are the experts here, but like, why do exchanges want to do this? Like, they should do it to promote engagement, right? And have a kind of another avenue for user engagement. But it's interesting though, if you look at, I don't know of any exchange, custody platforms are different, but that actually allows their users to participate in on-chain governance. Now, I haven't done an exhaustive search, but it's not something I've seen before.
Yeah, I've seen some instances of it with staking, allowing them to decide governance there for staking votes, but I haven't seen anything yet in the Polkadot or
No,
Kusama
definitely
space for
not.
sure.
Yeah,
But it's definitely interesting to us. I mean, our clients do ask from time to time to be able to do that because they are excited about the community. They've invested in, or not invested, but like they've supported these parachains, and now they've got the tokens, and they're wondering what else they can do with these things.
yeah.
So, and it's in our interest to keep them on our platform. So, I think in the future we'll see more of this, or I hope
Mm.
so. Certainly.
Yeah, I hope so too. It's something we think about a lot, right? Like, especially if governance, like if the networks move towards governance that is more nimble, then it's more important to get more people involved. And so this is definitely something we think about.
Yeah, I definitely just, I mean, looking at the industry as a whole, DAOs and governance, it's just, I mean, there's just so much interest in it right now, and like trying to figure out how to
It's
do
so
it
exciting,
well. So
right?
yeah,
Like, I mean,
yeah,
fundamentally, like what I think about is that like where we should be going with this is, and I may have talked a bit about this on the last podcast, is that blockchain should be a tool to better allow humans to coordinate in an unstoppable way, I think. And good governance and good, nimble, coherent governance is like very necessary to achieve that goal.
yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
So I guess the kind of last topic I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about is like, is the organization you work for, is Web3, and kind of the role you all have in this. I mean, obviously we just spent a long time talking about on-chain governance and the community, but like what how do you guys operate? Like, how are important decisions made and decided within the Web3 organization?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think we're still sort of at a level where, I mean, there's more people, there's about 50 people at the foundation, but like generally everyone is aligned in a way such that like important decisions are not usually super controversial, right? So of course there is a structure. There is kind of the foundation council that will kind of have the final call on important decisions, especially with regards to allocation of resources and things like that. But generally, people are aligned, and generally, we all there's not usually a lot of super controversial decisions that are debated, right? It's part of being in a small organization where everyone is aligned on the same goals.
So Gavin is undeniably a kind of cult figure within the crypto space. It's I don't think anybody would argue against that. But how does he fit within your group? I mean, is he like the Elon Musk, the Mark Zuckerberg of the group, or does he fit right in and you guys all just kind of treat him as the same as one of the team, and you just all work together
Yeah,
really well?
I think we all tend to work together really well. I mean, Gav is very focused on building Polkadot, right? And so, like, me being on the ecosystem and BD team, like, we're very focus on adoption, right? Adoption of Polkadot,
Mm-hmm.
where Gav works super, super closely with a lot of different developers actually building the product, right? And so there are definitely, areas where a lot of us interact and where we kind of join forces on stuff. But first and foremost, like Gav is building Polkadot. And so this is reflected in a lot of his relationships with people and how the organization functions.
So just as a kind of a nerd, I see a lot of his fingerprints on deep down in the code. I mean, just in
Yeah,
the weeds.
like he's
Does he
actually writing
generally?
code, right?
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, does he
yeah.
generally spend most of his time focusing there? I mean, I obviously see him on interviews and all kinds of other places, but is it like you got to drag him away from the coding keyboard to go do those things, or is he involved with like everything?
I love the question. Generally, right? Like first and foremost, like Polkadot needs to be a good product, and this is
Yeah.
this is like I mean this is what Gavin is doing and what he's focused on in terms of like interviews and events. He does do some of them, but I mean there has to be a good reason, right? It has to be value add, and it has to be a good opportunity to explain generally what we're building to enough people and to the right people, where this is more important than building a good product.
Yeah, I think that
So I
makes a
mean,
lot
and
of sense. Yeah.
this underscores the culture of the organization. I think to quite a large extent, like you have to make a concrete case for what you want to do, and I think that's important, and I think it's a great culture to have.
Yeah, I mean, it's super powerful when someone of his position or a founder of an organization, comes out and says something. There's a lot of weight behind it, and I think you got to pick and choose where you pull that pull that punch for sure. But it is really cool to see him so ingrained in the process. I mean, when you want to be able to trust something, you see him like really diving deep into it. It's cool.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, one thing with I see with some other networks, right, is like this sort of thing doesn't exist, and you have founders that may or may not have been involved in the actual product at some point, but for whatever reason are not involved today, right? And very much are going out there, talking at conferences, doing BD work, calling it maybe something else, and I think this ultimately dilutes the product or means that the product was never that much of the focus from the get-go, right? And this is decidedly what Polkadot is not doing.
yeah. I think you generally see at some point there's like a transition from like the original group or person to some new wave of
Yeah,
contributors. I mean, it's not always the worst thing. I mean, obviously Satoshi walked away, but I think still having that original vision kind of like deeply ingrained in your
yeah.
process and like where you go is,
But
I think it's valuable.
sometimes even like, you may think it's a transition from the original vision, or it means that original vision wasn't really there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is, I think, the part people should be especially careful of.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so one other thing I wanted to bring up that it doesn't really fit into much of what we just discussed, but like I'm really excited about it is, um, you're currently kind of crowdsourcing a branding redesign right now with
Yeah,
Polkadot, which is pretty
yeah.
incredible. I don't think anybody else has done that so far. Tell us a little bit about that, and what was the thinking behind that? I mean, were you
It's a
part
good
of that?
question. Yeah, I'm just to caveat this, I am not kind of the expert on this branding redesign, but I can give you a little bit of the motivation. I think it's a great initiative, and I have my choices for the branding choices, but like apparently it's quite controversial. But I think they're both they're both good. But basically, the idea was like gradually, right? Like I mean, the Web3 Foundation does things that are trying to build out kind of the ecosystem on top of Polkadot, right? But like we really want to do as little as possible. And we really want, like, personally, right? Like, I hope that, in some amount of time, the foundation doesn't exist, right? And all the assets go into the treasury, and then governance is robust and powerful enough to dictate the course of the network. Because, like, this is where we need to go. Like this is where it needs to be at some point. And then some things, right? Like are like, we have to move there in baby steps though. And like one of these like baby steps was, well, like why should the foundation or any other entity for that matter that's not on-chain governance decide what Polkadot branding should be? Like why should that be? And this is you can ask this question about so many other things, right? But we're just not there yet with all these things. And we thought that like one, like the community really should decide. Like this is a big thing. This is a big like first impression of like what Polkadot is. And two, this was a really nice way to like start slowly decentralizing these activities on chain. And so this is how the idea came out. Really, I believe. I'm not sure if the vote is over or not, but that vote started a couple of weeks ago, I think, into like what certain very critical aspects of the brand should be.
Yeah, I think it's a really fun way to start introducing that to people. Yeah, for sure.
And this is also like engagement that I think like more generally like people who are not super technical, but who really are involved in Polkadot and really believe strongly in Polkadot, where people can get involved by governance. Like it's a stupidly good spot to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this has been an amazing conversation, but I did want to end this on, part of the reason we're having this series of podcasts is to inspire and encourage people to go out and participate in the crowd loans and the auctions. Maybe if you could just give us, like, if someone said 30-second pitch, why should people be super excited about participating in this, and why should they go out there and look to try and support the projects working on auctions?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think of it as supporting projects, really. I mean, I guess you can't not think of it as that, but what I think of it as is like, if you believe in Polkadot and you think Polkadot, is potentially something great, then you should be taking a stake in figuring out like who the first platforms are on Polkadot. And really what we all want, like I think literally everyone, is we want Polkadot to be a good and useful platform. And a key ingredient of this is having extremely good parachains on that at the beginning and over time that actually provide real value. Right. And this is fundamentally what the crowd loan mechanism is for. It's so you can kind of indicate your interest in what you think brings the most value to the network. And so for anyone that believes in Polkadot and for anyone that wants Polkadot to succeed and be a valuable part kind of the blockchain world, then I don't think this is an event that you cannot that you can miss.
Amazing. Yeah. I completely agree. That's super amazingly inspirational, I think, and it's been an awesome accomplishment what everyone participating has done and managed to come up with. It's tremendously exciting. So thank you so much for joining us again, man. I hope we can do this again sometime. I keep taking up so much of your valuable time, but I'm sure the listeners really appreciate it.
Very happy to do it.
Just to recap again, where can people go to find out more about Web3 Foundation and Polkadot and Kusama?
Yeah, I mean, basically, like we have a ton of websites, and I'll make sure you guys have them after this show. But web3.foundation, Polkadot.network, Kusama.network, those are kind of the big ones. And then there's a bunch of other resources out there, but those are definitely the place to get started.
Awesome. Well, you heard it here. If you want to know more, we're going to be posting links, and obviously you can go to kraken.com to participate in the Parachain auctions. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Good luck with all the upcoming auctions. Looking forward to it. Tomorrow is going to be a pretty amazing day.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thanks again to our guest, Dieter. Make sure you like, subscribe, and review us on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll be sure to bring you along as we get a backstage pass to the world of Parachain auctions. And until next time, I'm Brian Hoffman, and this has been the Parachain Auctions Podcast. This content is not financial or investment advice. All interviews and discussions are opinions only. Kraken does not endorse the accuracy of this content. None of the following information should be construed as a recommendation to support any specific Parachain project or to participate in Parachain auctions in general. See our terms of service for more information.